Certainly, there's a case involving Bob Jones University and the IRS that is very important. So, in the mid-'80s, Bob Jones University, which is, I think, an evangelical Christian university, had a policy that people who were enrolled in the school could not date interracially. And the IRS had a policy that any organization that discriminated based on race could not claim tax-exempt status for federal tax purposes. And so they said, we're revoking your tax-exempt status to Bob Jones University unless you change the policy. Went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Bob Jones University said this is a violation of our right to exercise our religion, and the Supreme Court said, no, it's not. One could have resolved that case differently, right? And so, whether or not it's a violation of one's constitutional rights, there's a separate question, which I think was a very good question asked earlier, which is it a good law? Is taking away Bob Jones's tax-exempt status something that you want to do? Would someone want to go after BYU's tax-exempt status? Or even, and this is a very different question, right, a church's tax-exempt status. There's an investigation in California as to whether or not the LDS Church, by getting so involved in the Proposition 8 campaign, should lose its tax-exempt status, because the idea is you can't make political contributions with tax-exempt money, right? That if you're tax-exempt, you shouldn't be weighing in a very substantial way in a political debate. And I think those are tough questions. I don't think there's any way to get out of them. So while I do think the conflicts between religious liberties and civil rights are rare, they happen. There was a case in Massachusetts where the Catholic Church was doing adoptions, and Massachusetts said, well, you can't discriminate against same-sex couples. And they said, well, then we're not going to provide adoptions at all. It's not an obvious way to resolve that problem. That's why it's very important to me, in my capacity as a board member of Equality Utah, when we advocate for non-discrimination ordinances in Salt Lake City and other cities and counties across the state, all religious organizations are exempt, all of them. And the question of what organization is religious is what organizations say they're religious, including for-profit religious corporations like Zion's Bank, owned by, controlled by the church. It's exempt. It's more important for me to have the principle than to get rid of all the exceptions. And similarly, there's the federal law that you just made reference to, that would require no discrimination in employment based on sexual orientation or gender identity. Religious organizations are exempt. How do you determine what's a religious organization? You ask the organization. Can a court review that? If an organization just wants to say, well, I want to discriminate, so I'm religious? No. It's a final determination. And my feeling, and this is a controversial one even among people who do gay rights work, is give me the principle and I'll give you the exception. I don't care. I just want to hear the government say that it's wrong to fire someone just because they're gay. And if you have religious reasons that you want to do that, well then, go for it.
Reverend Seiter?
Oh, I can get you wound up.
I think much of this is because at the heart of religion, I don't care whether we're talking about Christianity or any other religion anyone plays out there, the religion itself, the very nature of faith, and the religious leaders who in many cases formed those faiths were political in nature. And so much what they talked about had to do with law, had to do with politics. And that's why churches and synagogues and mosques often have people who stand up in them and talk about things that have to do with politics and law, because you can't really separate them out when you talk about many of the issues that are concerned with faith. And so it really blurs that border between what is our responsibility as citizens and making sure that we have a chance for justice for everyone. And what do we mean when we apply justice to institutions of faith? And so that's where all these problems, I think, come
Yeah, no.
And I guess I just want to say that a lot of faith groups discriminate within themselves on all kinds of categories. I mean, there's lots of religions that will not have women clergy, for instance. And changes that will happen with them have to come from within those faith traditions. I went to seminary with a lot of Catholic women who were quite upset that they could never become priests. And I said, oh, I'm on an ordination track. So that was kind of fun. But I mean, the government's not going to tell the Catholic Church that they have to have women priests. I mean, that's not religious freedom. They're not going to tell the Catholic Church they have to have gay priests.
As long as you have the mic, can I...
As long as I have the mic?
Can I interject a question?
You certainly can.
A lot of this debate seems to pit religion against gay rights, and I set that up, was guilty of that also. But in a real sense, isn't part of the debate here religion against religion? For some faith traditions have deeply held traditions that would discourage any support or recognition of gay rights, while other faith traditions, such as yours, have deeply held long-standing traditions in support of those rights.
Yeah, absolutely. As someone who's performed many same-gender marriages, I feel religiously discriminated against, that I can't sign a marriage, but the state recognizes those weddings for straight couples and not for gay couples. And as religious leader, I see no difference between the relationships. I mean, any committed relationship has the potential for enhancing that person's life, their two people's life, their spirit, how they are in the world. And I do believe they are blessings to each other and to the rest of society, those committed relationships. So, you know, the state of Utah says, Theresa, it's fine, you can sign a marriage license. I actually don't know why clergy are in the business of doing actions for the state to begin with. I mean, why isn't marriage simply a religious matter, and that we have civil unions for the state, which would be equal for anyone, and that I can perform whatever weddings I want to in my church. They can do what they want in the Ward Church down the street, in the temple, wherever. What's the state got to do with what happens within our churches? And why does their religion count for more than mine? Yeah, we've been supporting of gay rights and gay marriage since the late 60s. So, yeah.
Just to say one thing along that line, my mother-in-law, who was a staunch Roman Catholic, said to me when I was in the ordination process, oh, I always wanted a priest in the family. She didn't quite expect it this way. What we're talking about here, I absolutely agree with what Theresa was saying a moment ago. I find it bewildering that as an Episcopal priest, whatever I carry out within the church, then the state regulates that with that marriage license. It seems to me that much of the controversy that we face as a country today over this issue could be so readily settled by separating those two things away from each other and still allowing everyone to have the faith process and the civic process go on. I do believe, however, that religious faith can play a very important role in this whole scenario and in any other controversial scenario if it allows people to move into discussion where even in the points of disagreement